Welcome to the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast on Tobacco Road Sports Radio and TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com as part of your Wrestling Wednesday card. This is the 83rd week of your most outlandish wrestling podcast on Tobacco Road. I'm your host, Michael Davis. WrestleMania and the Raw After Mania is so big, we have to talk the entire show and break things up, including what's next in this new era. I'll be joined later by some special guests that you'll get to see. Maybe Nate knows one of them, perhaps. But right now, I'm joined by Nate Warden. Me and him are kicking off the show. And if you have Nate's the champ. Nate's the champ.
That's right.
Whoa, that is a surprise right there. Nate has defeated, if you avoided spoilers up to this point, this is your time to cut off. But if you've watched WrestleMania, Nate's defeated Cody Rhodes, cashed in a secret Money in the Bank contract, and is now your new WWE champion, especially wearing the Cameron Crazy shirt to kick us off on Drop the Mic. It's always a pleasure to have Nate. Super excited that he gets to join us. But as I said, this is going to be your chance to avoid spoilers about WrestleMania, because that's what we're diving into today. Like, this is a wrestling podcast. I know several friends wanted to avoid. I actually avoided Saturday night spoilers. I was at a commentary event. Squared Circle champion Zach Colburn came to the show, and me and him got to hang out a little bit. Taylor Foley came as well, Bridget and her husband, my whole family as well. It was a great time. If you've never been to an independent wrestling show, highly recommend. And hopefully here in the next couple weeks, we're going to be able to announce our next Squared Circle Champions event. But we had a huge weekend. WrestleMania, I doubled down on Sunday and watched both nights back to back, kind of marathoning it. Yeah, I finished night 2 like on time, but dude, I was so revved up that I didn't get to sleep till 3 or 4 that morning.
Oh man.
And it was probably because of the ending, because at the very end, the 1,316-day reign of our tribal chief Roman Reigns came to an end at the hands of Cody Rhodes. Had some assistance on both sides during the Bloodline Rules effect that was happened because of night 1. But Nate, I want to get your reaction, your overall thoughts on Cody's victory. What was your thoughts when the ref counted the 3?
Man, just a relief. It is about time. I'm a big Cody fan. I've been following him, with this whole run. Saw him in AEW before he came over to WWE. Was real excited when he debuted at WrestleMania, and then he's been doing the whole story. So I was relieved. Roman had a great reign, but I was just starting to get Roman fatigue. He does what he does well, but when you've seen it, 10, 15 times, and that's kind of what you're going to get every time, you look for a little bit of change. And I think Cody's the guy. I think he's the top guy. He can be at the top of the company. I don't think we're going to be let down with his reign. So I was very, very excited to see him get the win and see him out there with his family and see the boys come out and congratulate him in the ring. And see this come through, because it was a tough year. Last year he lost, then he comes to the Raw After Mania and gets into the feud with Brock, and it was like, man, is this gonna go anywhere? So I'm glad that it did. So that was the outcome I was looking for, above all else, for WrestleMania, was to see that happen. So I'm glad it did. They did a great job with his production and bringing him out. His intro was very good, and then they had a good match, and I thought the appearances in there were nice, and some people liked them, some people didn't. I liked them. I thought it helped bring something to the match. The first 15-20 minutes is you knew what you were going to get, and then that just made it to where it was unpredictable, and so I enjoyed it.
And I love that they didn't immediately jump into PJ Steven from Tap Outs and Touchdowns always says gaga. Like, they didn't jump into the gaga of wrestling like right away. Like, they gave us a really good match to where if there was no interference, that match stands alone as one of the best in wrestling history. Especially when it comes to WrestleMania. Nate, I was a Roman guy. I'm still a Roman guy. Why do you think this reign, where you got fatigue from it?
I mean, he did a great job. Don't get me wrong. All the storylines, he really developed his character, and had a distinct way of wrestling, and he was very good at being that top guy and having that aura and feeling like a big deal. Sometimes you can have a champion that doesn't feel like a big deal. They can have a good work rate, or they can be a popular person, but then they either fall short, when they're in the ring, or just they don't have the quality opponents lined up. He had a really good reign, and he had a good storyline behind him to where you had to tune in every week to see what was going on. Just at a certain point, when you have a top guy who's been there 3.5 years, and you can't pinpoint the last time he's got a clean victory, and you just come to expect shenanigans at the end of every match. It At a certain point, when you're a wrestling mark, and you're not just a casual watcher, it begins to insult your intelligence, because you're like, everybody sees it, everybody knows it's coming. Why aren't the boys coming out of the back to help the babyface? You can start poking holes in like the way that the matches end, and that doesn't take away from him being a great champion and having a historic reign. But when that's the formula that you're getting every time he shows up, when he shows up, it begins to be depreciating, or diminishing returns. And so I'm that's the only tarnish that he has, is that he couldn't get a clean victory. And I know that's part of the story, but at a certain point, they build up baby faces, and you want to see them win, and then they just get screwed out of it. It's like, all right, what's going to happen next? That's kind of why I was glad to see it, kind of change over. That doesn't mean I'm not a Roman fan. That doesn't mean I thought he did a good job. He's one of those heels that did it so well that he had a following, that he almost turned babyface. So taking nothing away from him, but it was time, and Cody was the right dance partner. If somebody like Cody hadn't have been brought up, then you can't take the belt off Roman. There's way too much, but Cody was the right guy. So I
And,
think they got it right.
and it was interesting because, I mean, you touched on a couple things there. One of them being like every time a babyface wrestled Roman, the bloodline would come out, but nobody would come out and help the babyface. If you've looked at the last few months, and if you guys have watched, Monday Night Raw, Friday Night SmackDown, Cody's kind of aligned himself with certain people. He's aligned himself with Jey Uso. He's aligned himself with Seth Rollins, to where they're like actually in this together, and they're like, okay, we can't take the bloodline down just because there's one of us. We got to assemble, basically the Avengers
Yeah.
at the end of WrestleMania. And one of the guys who came out was John Cena. I think that made sense with Solo Sikoa beating him down
Absolutely.
the last time we saw him. But The Undertaker. Nate, do you know why? A lot of people were expecting Stone Cold at this spot. Do you know why we got The Undertaker?
I mean, if you just listen to the audience, he gets a pop like nobody else. And it's not just volume. I was trying to explain it to somebody. For booking reasons, it doesn't make sense. I mean, why is he there? Why did he show up on NXT to, the last time he did, to get the pop, to have the moment. But when you listen to Cena, he gets a massive reaction. You listen to Seth coming out through the crowd with the Shield music, massive reaction. And those are like yeah. But then when you listen to the Undertaker's pop, it's like the whoa, it's like a deeper, like, what? I can't believe he's here. So it's I think that was the reason, just to make it bigger. And they had to have somebody to take down the Rock. And they didn't want to do some, they had Seth do a very specific job, kind of being that distraction from Roman and being Cody's shield. So it was just the guy they put in there. I think it could have been a few different people, but yeah, storyline wise, I don't know what his feud was with The Rock. Stone Cold probably would have been the better one.
Oh, I'm having an epiphany on air. I'm trying to explain it. What if Undertaker's beef wasn't with The Rock? What if Undertaker's beef was with Roman and Paul Heyman?
Could
Because
be.
Paul Heyman led Brock Lesnar into WrestleMania 30 10 years ago and beat the streak. And the only other guy to beat Undertaker at WrestleMania was Roman Reigns 3 years later. Maybe that's why.
Could be. Or if you, it could have been a number of things, but Undertaker, you listen to his podcast, he has a high respect of the business and doing things the right way. He was always kind of the guy in the back who was, kind of the judge for like wrestlers court and stuff. And so, like if you get really into the kayfabe, it's like, okay, here we are. No, the champion's not winning clean. He keeps screwing the baby face. Maybe he just shows up to clean it up. I don't know. Yours is a lot better than mine, but you could think of a few reasons why he would show up. But, I think honestly, it was probably just because he's a big legend and it made it bigger and they couldn't get Stone Cold. So,
and they probably asked Stone Cold. Let's be honest. I mean,
Yeah.
if you can get Stone Cold, Stunner, and The Rock, like that's money any day of the week, especially at a nostalgic WrestleMania. I'm super excited about. I'm not sure what's next for Cody. There was some hints on Monday Night's Raw in terms of like what's the direction. But it's going to be very interesting. We're probably going to learn more, honestly, on SmackDown than anything, or at the draft here in the next few weeks. But Roman's title reign wasn't the only one to end this week. It was Gunther. Gunther's title run ending at WrestleMania Night 1 against Sami Zayn. And a lot of people, Nate, were questioning why Sami Zayn was in this spot. A lot of people really got behind Chad Gable last fall and thought he was going to be the one to dethrone Gunther. But instead, Chad Gable just coaches Sami Zayn through it and ends it. What's your thoughts on Sami being the guy? Was he the right guy, or would you prefer Gable, or would you have preferred somebody else?
I think Sami is the right enough guy there. If it wasn't Sami, my pick would have been either Braun Breaker or Ilya Dragunov to really put both of them, either one of them, over on the main roster. Like Ilya debuted last night. He got a reaction, but he's going to have to. It's going to be a climb, for him to really be over with the audience. I think Braun Breaker is definitely an impact person who won't have to do much of a climb. I think he has that explosiveness. He's kind of got that X factor like Brock. But I'm okay with Sami. Sami is beloved. He did a lot of good things with the Bloodline. Some would argue he was peak Bloodline before Rock came back. And for Gable, I think Gable is very good. I think he needs kind of that LA Knight build where it's kind of slow, and he's had it. I think you can still make Gable bigger. Maybe it makes him beating Gunther, but I like it. I like it being Sami Zayn. I think he's more established. He's been in world title matches. It lends that credibility to that belt. But there's certainly some room there for Gable and Zayn to go at each other. But I would like to see Gable have more time. And I think he's going to benefit from the rub with Sami, more than perhaps the people in his group. And so maybe this is a turning point with him where he starts rubbing shoulders with like main event people, and it helps him grow as a character.
Dude, and I think Sami Zayn's established. Okay.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Sami had his WrestleMania moment last year. Like, you can't top main eventing Night 1 with your best friend and ending the longest tag title run in WWE history against the Usos at the peak of the Bloodline story. You can't top that. So I get Sami's the underdog from the underground, but dude, I loved how you would present Braun Breaker or Ilya Dragunov, because Ilya has shown that he can go toe to toe with Gunther from their work in NXT.
Yeah.
Braun Breaker could literally Goldberg his way into ending Gunther's run. And could you imagine the reaction from the crowd if you've seen Gunther withstand all of these 30-minute bouts where he's hard chopping and everything, and all it takes is for a couple spears and Braun Breaker's ended that title run in his debut? Like that, those are whoa. Like maybe they missed their moment. And get it, I get it. They got the Rocky vibe for WrestleMania 40, but when you brought up Ilya and Braun, that they probably missed their moment.
Well, I think with Braun, I think he's a made man. They're so deep right now at the top, top and upper middle part of the card, that you run the risk of him kind of being lost. And like you bring him in, and it's like, what do you do with him? And so they have the benefit of having such depth right now that where like a couple years ago, before all these stars were made, before you had guys, being raised up like Sammy and LA Knight, who felt like legitimate, like main event guys, you could bring up a Braun Breaker and immediately establish him. But now I think he's got a little bit more competition, and you could still do it. I don't want this to happen, but you could have Sammy have a good like title reign, and then when it kind of cools off a little bit, I mean, Braun could come in and honestly like squash him. And like, I don't want that to happen, but like if they wanted to present Braun as like a heel, like a nasty heel, and they could do that. And I mean, immediately he could come in, and if they wanted him to be a face, he could smash Logan Paul when they're ready for that, So I don't think they necessarily missed it with Braun. It would be hard it would kind of look like a hot shot if they brought him in like 2 months out, and all of a sudden he's your new guy to beat, Gunther. I feel like they've had that build with Sammy where he feels established. He doesn't feel like the new guy. You've seen him in main events, and that he has the promo. So I'm okay with what they did, and they had a great finish to it. It was believable. So I'm a big fan of Sammy, and I'm a big fan of Gunther, but I'm okay with it. And now, you got King of the Ring coming around. I mean, is he the favorite? Or is he a potential program for Cody? Some people think he's going down at SummerSlam to The Rock. I don't think he is. So they've teased him and Gunther with the Royal Rumble. I mean, that's a program just waiting to happen that people would be salivating over.
And people have to remember Bash in Berlin, August
Yep.
31st, I believe.
Yep.
That's Gunther's moment.
Yep.
Like you have to capitalize on that. They've also announced Clash at the Castle 2 early on in the summer. That's Drew McIntyre's moment.
Yeah.
And Drew McIntyre had his moment until CM Punk got in the way. If you guys didn't watch, Drew McIntyre actually beat Seth Rollins after Seth Rollins went through night 1, was really hurt, limped into night 2, opened the show, which, by the way, before we get into that, having the night 1 main event be the second longest in WWE's WrestleMania history behind the 60-minute Iron Man match between Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart, that just goes to show you this is a new era in WWE, and they're actually putting effort. If that was 2 years ago and somebody else was in charge, that would have been a quick 10, 12-minute match, and we have been like, we'd left feeling robbed, but we didn't feel robbed leaving that night 1 main event. But night 2, Seth felt robbed, losing Drew McIntyre. He even turns back to the ring and says, "You deserve it." So that was major props. But then Drew McIntyre potentially got robbed, talking trash CM Punk. CM Punk actually, trips him, hits him with his elbow brace, and then Damian Priest finally cashes in the only second cash-in in WrestleMania history. The first one coming 9 years ago at WrestleMania 31 when Seth Rollins did Heist of the Century. And Damian Priest does it in epic fashion, wins the World Heavyweight Championship. I'm so excited for him. But Nate, there's so many moving parts with Seth, with Drew and Punk, with Damian Priest. First things first with Seth, what do you make of his title run? Was this the right way to present your first World Heavyweight Champion in over 10 years? And do you think he takes time off now?
Yeah, I think he definitely had a great run. I think he was the right guy for it. He got hot at the right time. Everybody was behind him. And I think it did exceed expectations because now you care about that title, and people have cared to be like, okay, Drew is really starting to establish himself in this new character that he's doing, where some felt he was a little bit stale before, and they cared that, who's going to win this match. So I feel like he brought legitimacy to the title, in the same vein that Gunther did. I think when you have somebody who's there that the people care about, and they have clean defenses, and they have a sizable reign, it makes a difference. For Drew, I think he got in his own way. I think he screwed himself. Drew screwed Drew. If I had to say it like that, he was gloating in front of a pipe bomb, and it blew up on him. And so I think it furthers his character, and it's going to make him certainly more scorched earth in his pursuit of that title. And potentially more violent, and I think that'll lend itself well to the character, and it'll make him even more, probably snarky and sarcastic, which has really been, what has put him over. So, in terms of Seth, I think it'd be good to take some time off, to heal up. He put his body out there. It's kind of like when Orange Cassidy defended the international title, I don't know, like 25 times. And, it was like just getting beat in the ground. And, like you just see him, it wouldn't hurt. And it wouldn't hurt his character too, to like just take a break and then come back and start a new program. And it's fresh, So I think it's a good time. And with them introducing new people to Raw, and with Cody being where he is, I think it lends itself to Seth getting some time off.
Yeah, and very well deserved too. Like
Oh, for sure.
316 days as world heavyweight champion. And I was almost a little critical of that because the title was made to where it wasn't held on one guy for so long. But Triple H explained this in his press conference where he's like, if you need to create a title and make it mean something, you put it on Seth Rollins and let him run with it. And I genuinely believe that now looking back on the title reign, 316 days for Seth Rollins meant something. That way, Drew McIntyre was built up. Drew McIntyre got to have his WrestleMania moment still. People are forgetting that. Even though it was like the title was taken away, he still did have his WrestleMania moment when it in front of fans. But now we have a story that's building with CM Punk, and now Damian Priest gets to run with the World Heavyweight title. We know that Jey Uso won the Fatal 4-Way instead of Drew McIntyre on Monday's Raw. Do you see Jey Uso potentially taking this title off Priest, or do you think Priest runs with it for a little while?
It's hard to say. It's been a while since Priest has kind of had a singles run. I like his character. He feels tough. He feels like a guy that can beat you up, and that's important when you have a top guy. It's really hard to say what they're going to do with that. I think it would hurt Priest to like immediately drop it. And Drew kind of hinted last night, you're a transitional champion, blah, blah, blah. There's a little truth to that. That's kind of the gimmick of the Money in the Bank briefcase, is it allows you to kind of have a gimmick to transition the championship. But I would like to see him, have a couple opportunities to defend it and see how he operates as a champion, as a world champion, before he loses it. And Jay, I think he's certainly been elevated the last year. He's very popular. I didn't love his match at WrestleMania with his brother, but I do like him as a character. Very much like him as a character. One of my favorites. I think they have a good match, but I don't think Jay needs to win it. I think Priest needs it more than him.
Yeah, and I'm so excited for Priest, like seeing how hard he's worked from his independent scene. He had a match or two at AML Wrestling, which is a local independent.
Shout out.
Shout out. Tracy might have had the best mistake or WrestleMania moment. If you guys have no idea what we're talking about, you're going to have to ask Tracy Myers about that. But yeah, Damian Priest, especially watching him through Ring of Honor and then watching him through NXT. And Triple H mentioned like watching a lot of these guys go through, and Triple H didn't call anybody out, but he kind of highlighted their frustration over the last few years with creative and the process. And Triple H is like, since they stuck through it and since they stayed with us and since they, kept going, kept persevering, now they're seeing the fruit of their labor and trusting in the process. And now we're finally here in this new era, and this new era really kicks off officially with WrestleMania 40, which some are calling the greatest WrestleMania of all time. Nate, before you get out of here, I do want to touch on this question. Is it too early to reflect on this being the greatest WrestleMania of all time, or are you convinced at where this stands in the annals of history?
I mean, in terms of money making, all the measurables, like Triple H said, are there. In terms of the greatest WrestleMania of all time, I don't have one to just counter and say it's better, but I don't think this one is. I thought Night 2 was good. The ending was phenomenal. So that's what it's going to be remembered for. I don't think a lot of the stuff, and you're going to remember the tag match. Personally, I hated the tag match. I fell asleep. I watched it a second time. I almost fell asleep. Rock did a good job. They worked a fine match. It was just, I hated it. But I think it'll be remembered for Cody as Cody's WrestleMania. And to a smaller extent, Sammy dethroning Gunther. So I think night 2 was very good. The last few years, night 1 has been the better night. But outside of Cody's big win and Rock being a part of it, I don't know that it has enough to be the greatest of all time. And again, I can't name. I can't come in here and name, hey, the one that is the greatest of all time, because I got back into wrestling like 4 years ago. And didn't get to watch a lot of the early ones as a kid. But I've seen clips and bits and pieces, and I feel like you have a hard time really just cementing this immediately as the greatest of all time. What do you think? Do you think it's the best of all time?
I don't know. I'm back and forth on it, Nate. I'll be honest with you, because nostalgia hits you as a fan, right? The first ever WrestleMania I got to watch on TV was 21. That was, even though I was pulling for the heels, that's when John Cena beat JBL. That's when Batista beat Triple H. That's when Edge won Money in the Bank. And people who've watched Drop the Mic know how big of a fan of Edge I am. That had Angle and Michaels, like one of the best WrestleMania matches of all time. That was included in my best 40 moments of WrestleMania that I write for fansfirstsports.com. I wrote WrestleMania 40 recap, wrote a bold prediction list for Raw After Mania. Did not turn out as planned. But you can go look at my ideas and see if they were better than what Triple H put together. Raw After Mania was great.
Dang.
Raw After Mania was great. I could have booked it a little bit better. Couldn't we all? 21 stands out. 31 stands out. When you look at WrestleMania's 15, 17, 19, those were the Rock Austin trilogies. I think you can put that up there. I think you can put 30 up there. 39 was great too. I think WrestleMania 39 was fantastic, but I think not necessarily this is the greatest WrestleMania of all time. Maybe it will be, but this is going to be remembered probably more than any other WrestleMania, because this was the start of the Renaissance era, the Triple H era, whatever you think it could be called. That was the start of this. Now, the WrestleMania and WWE coverage continues here on Drop the Mic. We got to let Nate get out of here. And we'll welcome in our next guest that you might have seen on the show before. Want to tease you here for the next couple of minutes. But Nate, thank you so much for hopping on with us.
Absolutely. Always fun to talk about wrestling.
Yep. And the WrestleMania coverage continues right now on the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast. Welcome back to the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast on Tobacco Road Sports Radio and our YouTube channel. So excited that we got to have Nate Warden in on the show to begin. And right now, to continue our WrestleMania talk, we will actually in a few moments, but we have some news that broke yesterday. I'm joined by Zach Colburn, and I'm also joined by Luke. You recognize him from the Cheap Pop Wrestling Podcast. He was a guest earlier this year, but now it's Fantasy Faction. And I am leading the way through Fantasy Faction. I actually need to look and see if I won this past time or if somebody caught up to me. I want to avoid the results. That way, if like I got upset the scoring, I wouldn't take away Luke's invitation from the show. Luke's also joining us after a lot of trips. He was actually at WrestleMania in Philadelphia, so we'll touch on that. But we had some big news. For better or worse, Tony Khan has decided that he is going to show the world the footage from AEW All In London between CM Punk and Jungle Boy Jack Perry. This is wild, guys. In my opinion, it's kind of childish, reckless, and has no place in storyline, especially if you're not bringing Jungle Boy back, and especially with CM Punk in WWE. Quickly, those were my thoughts. Luke, I know you've been traveling and you're trooping along through this. Thank you for joining us. But what do you think of this news?
Well, first, thanks for having me, Mike. Nice to be back. Always nice to chat to you, mate. I will I will admit I was skeptical about this news when it first came out, just because of the wording behind it. So I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but have they said they're just showing all in footage, or did they say specifically they're showing Punk and Jungle Boy footage? Because my first thought is that they're trolling us and they're just going to show some like generic backstage footage, maybe a skit or two. But I'm very skeptical about it. It's weird. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it's interesting because like, especially with CM Punk being in WWE, I don't know what this advances. Zach, when you heard about this news of Tony Khan showing Punk and Jungle Boy footage from All In London, they're going to show that tonight. Apparently, what were your thoughts?
It's a little odd because I mean, you look back, we're what now, April, right after WrestleMania. This incident took place back, what was it, in August? I mean, it seems a little surprising that they'd wait 8 months to show that kind of footage. You figured if the footage was going to be shown, it would have been maybe on the road to Revolution with the whole EVP buildup. But what does this? But it's like Luke said, what does this advance? I mean, you've already got Jungle Boy Jack Perry being known as the scapegoat over when he's wrestling in Japan. You got Punk in WWE, so it's like it doesn't advances no storylines, especially for two guys that really are barely either not with the company or not working in the company at the moment.
Yeah, it's very odd. And so we'll figure out more tonight on Dynamite when AEW, airs their show. But I guess they're trying to create buzz because WWE was on a roll. I've been covering WWE and WrestleMania for the past week on fansfirstsports.com, where I'm writing WrestleMania 40 recap. I predicted some Raw after Mania stuff that didn't pan out the way I thought it would. Maybe I could book it a little bit better, but nonetheless, Triple H gave us an incredible weekend, and Luke was a part of that weekend. Luke, I would love to know, just from your perspective being there live, what was your overall experience like?
So with any WrestleMania, amazing. It was brilliant. Like, this is my fifth WrestleMania now. The last few I've said this is the last one now. I've kind of experienced it. It's done. But no, you just like you miss the atmosphere when you're there. It really is just kind of a different universe you're in for a few days, because everything that's happening, everyone you meet, everyone you sort of bump into is now immersed in this world for a few days. So it's amazing. I went to night one, and apart from a few lulls in between, just because of the cold a little bit, it was a little bit windy, to be fair. But all in all, it was a hot crowd. The matches were hot. The spots hit really well. It was an amazing night. Absolutely amazing.
Wow. And were you there for night two?
No, so I went to a watch party just down the road from the stadium.
Wow.
Rob Van Dam was there watching it. The Jobber Tears podcast hosted it. So I went there with a few friends and got into a little warm atmosphere, had some chicken wings, bathrooms close by. I think that was the way to do it.
Hey, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
And for a watch party, you can say that you watched one of the most historic reigns ever in
Oh
wrestling
my God.
history, and while you were watching with Rob Van Dam, because Cody Rhodes did beat Roman Reigns and ended the 1,316-day title reign. I got Nate's opinion on just the entire atmosphere, kind of like Cody's reign, but when it comes to Roman Reigns, we don't know what's next for him. He wasn't on Monday Night Raw a couple nights ago. We saw The Rock come out, but it looks like The Rock is going away for a while after he had his 45-minute promo with Cody Rhodes and the commercial-free Raw that we got. It's interesting because I wrote an article for Fans First about Roman's legacy after this reign and everything. So Zach, when you look at Roman's legacy, what do you think about, and what's next for Roman in the bloodline?
Hmm. For his legacy, I feel like his legacy is kind of three different legacies. You got his legacy with the Shield. You got his one when he went out on his own, his battle with leukemia, and now you have this tribal chief legacy. So really, all three, all three of them. I mean, you can't, or have been amazing. I mean, it's regardless of how long the title reign was. I mean, 1300-day title reign. Who knows if we'll ever see that again? I mean, you think about it. The longest one of that, the last 25 years was 400 days. So what Roman did, regardless of how you feel about him, was amazing. And but as for what's next for him, I'm not real sure what's next for him. I mean, my guess is he'll probably be off TV for a while. And my guess is if he makes the return, it'll probably be potentially SummerSlam like it was 4 years ago during COVID. So, and what's next for the bloodline? That's a good question. I mean, because now you're down from, what happens with Paul Heyman, what happens with Solo, what happens with Jimmy. I mean, there's going to be a lot of questions, and hopefully within the next, month or so, we'll have a lot more of those answers.
And I also mentioned last week's in my recordings, like Roman Reigns isn't a part-time champion. And what I consider a part-time champion was when Brock Lesnar held the title or Goldberg held the title and they won, and then they were completely off TV for 4 months. There was no storyline. It was like they wanted you to forget the title was there. That wasn't the case with Roman. While Roman would, miss a few SmackDowns here and there in between, like the story kept going because you had Jimmy and Solo and Paul Heyman in the mix to where they never let you forgot that the tribal chief was at the head of the table. Luke, how do you think we're going to look back at this reign and era of the bloodline and the tribal chief?
See, I'm glad you said that. That's the word era, because that's what this whole thing was. It was, I mean, it was a reign, it was a storyline, and it was a whole era, almost like 4 years at this point. So we talk about Attitude Era, PG era, whatever. I've said this for a while now. I think this was the Bloodline era, and it's been just one great symphony for 3.5, 4 years. And so it's going to be looked at just in the annals of wrestling history. It's not going to be forgotten. It's going to be up there with the greatest storyline of all time, if not first, top two easily.
Oh, for sure. Like,
Yeah.
and especially like people were starting to compare this to the New World Order, the NWO, and like how they changed the entire generation in the late 90s. This this tribal chief era really propelled wrestling into new heights when honestly, with everything going on between the pandemic or the Vince McMahon stuff, like it should have taken WWE down. And instead, looking on the outside of the tunnel, we're at the light, and WWE is probably as bigger and better than ever before. It's absolutely wild to where people like Luke can go and watch night one of WrestleMania live and see that no longer are the tag team titles unified. We actually finally split the tag team titles. That Austin Theory and Grayson Waller, known as A-Town Down Under, grabbed the SmackDown tag titles pretty early in the match, and then the match concluded when R-Truth and The Miz climbed up and retrieved the Raw tag team titles. We kind of understood where they were going with this when they emphasized that the match wasn't over until both sets of tag titles were removed. And then, Luke, I want to ask you, when you saw the titles and you saw how far separated they were live in person, did you see this tag team title split coming?
No, at first I thought I'd missed something, like, because going into it, I assumed it was for the undisputed championships, and then whoever wins would be the undisputed tag team champions. So when they split the belts, I mean, I'd heard rumors online. There were a few memes posted that Adam Pearce and Nick Aldis were going to come together on that and agree, but it never really came into fruition. So it was a bit confusing on the night. But glad because it meant they were going to get split, and I've personally wanted that for some time. And mate, you talk about bucket list moments. Like I was there when R-Truth finished the story. Like my goodness. So yeah, it was confusing, but not mad of how it all went down at all. It was everything went great. The match was great, and the results, yeah. I'm happy with both tag team champions. I think going forward.
Wow. That was a really brilliant way of putting it. Me and Zach both glanced at each other. We were like, "Yep, that hits the spot." Zach, I know you and I have talked a little bit about this with splitting the tag titles. I'm just happy that R-Truth finished his story, like Luke said.
Absolutely. I loved seeing R-Truth finally get his moment because you look, and really in reality, the Miz also got his moment too. I mean, because you look back at some of Miz's past WrestleManias, he's had I mean, he headlined one back, 27. I mean, but you look back outside of his, his win at 27, and I think his IC title win against Wade Barrett, or the shirt I'm wearing, Bad News Barrett. He really, I mean, his moments have been, I wouldn't say memorable, because I mean, really, but this one, he get a chance, and a lot of people don't realize, Awesome Truth was a tag team well over a decade ago and just got back together. So to see both of them get that moment, but for R-Truth, it's been a long time coming, because you think about how long he's been with the company, how much he's done for the company, and just he provides that comedic relief that we all love and we all know and love.
Yeah, and it's interesting because he did take a brief stint in TNA where he was Ron the Truth Killings before returning to WWE. He is the longest tenured active wrestler on the roster when you combine his work in the 90s to what he's done since his return to the company. And honestly, like being at 55 years old, being in the shape he is, and I didn't think he would ever get like a legitimate push or a storyline because I mean, he was just that funny guy who would pop up and has now the most 24/7 title reigns in WWE history. Thank goodness that belt is gone. And to let him have that WrestleMania moment, for him to never win at WrestleMania until this year, really shows the entire locker room and creative have a huge amount of respect for R-Truth. I still think they got this wrong. I said on last week's show, and it's clipped somewhere on our social media, where it would have been perfect if R-Truth and The Miz were to take down the Raw tag titles. R-Truth climb back down, show Miz like, "Hey, I got it." And The Miz is like, "You got the Raw tag titles. You were supposed to get the SmackDown tag titles." And then have Theory and Waller grab those SmackDown tag titles. I like my ending just a tad bit better. But hey, it was still very enjoyable. Luke, you were there night one, and the opening match was Rhea Ripley defeating the man Becky Lynch and retaining her title. I'd said on last week's show that Becky Lynch could have beaten Rhea Ripley. What do you think about Mommy retaining and staying on top?
I'm good with it. I don't think Rhea should lose it anytime soon. It would have been probably a nice pop for people if Becky Lynch had won, but she's got like that contract negotiation coming up, or her contract's up or something. But it's like Rhea said in the press conference, like there's a new guard now. There's a new, tippity top of the wrestling scene. And I mean, if Roman and Gunther can have such long reigns, then who better to have an epically long women's title reign than Rhea Ripley? Because she's the best thing to come along. She's one of the most engaging people to come along, I think, since China. Like she stands out clearly. So yeah, until someone is more someone, it's going to take someone epic to beat her. Maybe they're building Jade Cargill up for that. I don't know. But yep, very happy with her retaining. Again, top match. Rhea Ripley killed it 2 years in a row in these title matches. So yeah.
Yeah, especially with Rhea beating Charlotte Flair last year to become champion, going to this year's WrestleMania and beat Becky Lynch. Maybe next year we finally get the Rhea Ripley Bianca Belair dream match that, I mean, it's somewhere down the road. Jade Cargill could be a good fit as well. You said Tippy Top, and that reminded me of Tiffy Time. Maybe Tiffany Stratton gets on the same brand as Rhea Ripley. That would be cool. We have the draft later this month. But the other part of this, Zach, was Damian Priest cashing in his briefcase to not only have Rhea Ripley's title in Judgment Day, but Damian Priest finally gets his push and is now the world heavyweight champion. But he's the second cash in ever at WrestleMania, the first being at WrestleMania 31 when Seth Rollins inserted himself into the main event against Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar with Heist of the Century. I got to write about that on fansfirstsports.com, so that article's up as well. But when you look at all the cash-ins we've seen over the years, Zach, starting at New Year's Revolution in 2006 when Edge cashed on John Cena all the way up until this weekend, is Damian Priest cash-in the greatest cash-in of all time? And if not, who else would you put up there?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I mean, I would definitely put his in the top 5, no question. But you look, I mean, his moment cashing in really became 3 moments, not just for him, but for Drew and for Punk. I'd honestly, Seth Rollins, I mean, his is still so memorable. So I would have to put that, top 2, his and Edge's, just because they were just the way that they did it. I mean, if I had to compare it to one, I'd say I'd go with probably a Dolph Ziggler, like of that level. I mean, because you think about it, at the time, Ziggler was, Priest and Ziggler were both a lot the same, were good wrestlers, but just hadn't quite gotten over that hill yet. I mean, you think with, Seth, he was already over when he cashed in, and Edge was to a degree as well. But like I said, at the time, it really elevated this cash in, like Dolph's, should elevate him to, the next level. I mean, and hopefully, it does that. But question is, how long a reign does he have? Because you look back, some reigns after they win the Money in the Bank haven't been very long. I mean, you got Dean Ambrose. His was, I think, until from like Money in the Bank till I think SummerSlam that year in 2016, or maybe later than that. But yeah, I mean, you think back, I mean, it's hard to tell how long his reign will be.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. The longest one I can think of off the top of my head, and I could be wrong on this, but Seth Rollins cashed in at WrestleMania, and then he had to relinquish the title in November due to the torn ACL back in November 2015, which led to Roman Reigns beating Dean Ambrose in the tournament finals at Survivor Series for Sheamus to cash in, and Sheamus didn't even hold the briefcase that long. That's a good question, Zach. I'm gonna deflect to Luke on that. How long do you think Damian Priest holds on to this world heavyweight title, and who could take it from him?
Well, they have to be careful with it, right? Because they've spent all this time and invested all this effort in building him up. Now, just because he's won the belt, he hasn't quite made it, if you will. I know that sounds weird, but he now he has to, really convince the audience that he's a legitimate champion. So they really can't take it off him any less than, you have to think, 6-7 months. And the question is, how often will he defend it to? What kind of champion he'll be? I hope he defends it a lot. If it is a shorter reign, then he has to defend it a lot and put on a lot of bangers. But I hope it's at least 7 or 8 months. Survivor Series time, perhaps.
That'd be great, especially establishing Damian as that top heel and as that top champion, defending every month. I know they're about to go international with a lot of their pay-per-views and premium live events. And as a matter of fact, through August, the only premium live event in the United States is going to be SummerSlam at the Cleveland Browns Stadium. Everything else is in France or Saudi Arabia or Toronto, Canada, Germany. They're going to Bash at Berlin. They're going to go to Glasgow for Drew's hometown. I'm sure Drew's going to be in a main event in some sort of fashion for that one, whether he's competing for the World Heavyweight title or the WWE title remains to be seen. And we might have some direction after Raw After Mania. WrestleMania started the new era. Raw After Mania kind of continued that and showed, hey, this is Triple H's ball, and according to Triple H, it's everyone else's ball, and they're going to run with it in a new direction, go bigger and better than ever. The Raw After Mania crowd in Philadelphia was incredible. Hats off to them. One of the guys in there was Mike Mealy from the Mouth Off with Mike Wrestling podcast. He's usually a regular on Out of Pocket. He's usually a regular on Drop the Mic. If you haven't checked his stuff out, he's going to be putting a lot more content after attending WrestleMania. So, and he also got me into Fantasy Faction. So, Mike is responsible in some way for this episode now that Luke's on. But when you think about Raw After Mania, were you let down, or do you think this was the best Raw that they could have had? Luke, I'll bring that question to you first.
Definitely not as good as they could have had. You know, they could have gone how they have in the past, where it's moment after moment and debuts and a title change and a cash in, maybe. You know, but this one felt quite different. They were wrapping things up. I think, though, that the festivities for the most part had been, you know, concluded for the weekend, and it was just about putting on a semi-entertaining show, but also, you know, closing a few things down, like the Rock and Cody stuff, planting some teasers there. You know, you had Jade Cargill in another match, so giving her a bit more exposure, so setting, you know, her up, getting those engines going. And you know, a surprise appearance from John Cena and The Rock, for that matter, is not bad. So I can't be let down by that Raw.
Yeah, especially, to be fair, if I bought a ticket for Raw After Mania and I saw The Rock and John Cena as a surprise, along with Ilya Dragunov and Roxanne Perez, the champions from NXT, I would not leave disappointed. Zach, what were your thoughts when you think about the Raw After Mania a couple nights ago?
Well, first I gotta correct you. You said 45-minute promo. It was 44 minutes and 16 seconds to be exact.
Wow. Okay, let's make a big deal about 44 seconds. Okay.
Well, ask Drew McIntyre about that. But in all seriousness, I mean, you look back at last year's Raw after WrestleMania, it was such a letdown. But this year's was a lot better. I mean, you saw it's like you said, you saw some storylines get wrapped up, but you also saw some storylines beginning. I mean, you look back at, the main event. I mean, you're gonna have Jey Uso and Damian Priest for the WWE for the World Heavyweight Championship, most likely at Backlash, and then you got Drew and CM Punk, who are, my guess is they're gonna feud somewhere down the road. And you have a lot, and of course, the Judgment Day, what's going to happen with them, because you got the tag titles are off Dirty Dom and Finn now. So, and Damian Priest has got the title. I mean, do you have kind of like potentially an evolution turn? Because you think back, Randy Orton was a lot like Damian Priest. He had a mid card title, but then he wins that first heavyweight championship. Then what happens?
Wow. I was kind of thinking along the same lines of you, with maybe Finn Balor turning on Damian Priest, because Balor's kind of been overshadowed, and as great as Judgment Day is, I hope Judgment Day lasts forever. They've accomplished what they set out to do 2 years ago when Edge got them together. They wanted to push Damian Priest, and they wanted to push Rhea Ripley. And as a result, Dominic Mysterio's gotten the rub. R-Truth has gotten the rub. JD McDonough, I think, is getting a rub right now. That's working really well for him. Finn Balor could turn and, Judgment Day start imploding. Dominic maybe doing some more stuff with Legado del Fantasma. And we could see all these guys go their separate ways, because I also think Damian Priest and Rhea Ripley, if they were forced to go on a singles run by themselves, they would both last. They both be able to stand on their own 2 feet and deliver for the WWE fans. But yeah, we are running out of time here on Tobacco Road Sports Radio. I do want to make sure you guys go follow us on Facebook. Go follow us on Instagram at Drop the Mic Wrestling. I have a TikTok that I'm dropping some reels on from these episodes. Drop the Mic, The Cat Cave, Out of Pocket with Michael Davis, that airs 4 times a week. If you haven't, go follow Zach at ZWC Sports. He does a lot of good content. He's got a new job up in the Watauga area. He's kicking butt. I'm so proud of him. Also got to hang out with him for Squared Circle Champions event this past Saturday. Shannon and I did commentary. Zach came. Got to meet Austin Aries. Austin Aries will probably be back for a Squared Circle Champions event because he did win the main event. He did become #1 contender for the world title. So we'll have to see what happens there. You can go follow Luke and the stuff they're doing with Fantasy Faction. Honestly, if you guys love fantasy football or fantasy basketball, that is the kind of vibe that Fantasy Faction gives. I don't have to worry about somebody taking my guy. I just have to worry about who I put on my roster and bring in the championship home. And now that my podcast is concluded, I'll go see if I actually won this year. It ended this past weekend. This is our week off. So this is a perfect time, by the way, guys. We're in between seasons. Go contact Luke. Go contact him. Go figure out like, hey, I want to join Fantasy Faction. It's right there at _Fantasy Faction. He's absolutely incredible. Super guy to work with. Absolutely love you guys. And we'll have to see what WWE builds on with WrestleMania 40 in the books, with Raw After Mania in the books. With the draft coming up soon. I'm going to be covering this all on fansfirstsports.com for FFSN. I got a WrestleMania 40 recap. I got Raw After Mania bold predictions that none of them came true, but they would have been really awesome. And I'm going to be dropping a lot more this week and here in the near future. So be sure to do that. We will be back with Out of Pocket with Michael Davis tomorrow at 12:30 p.m. Eastern time, unless some big breaking news happens and we have to supersize the show again. But it's your first daily sports show, and it's a roundtable on Tobacco Road on this YouTube channel 4 days a week. But most of all, guys, thank you so much for spending your Wednesday with us on Drop the Mic. We have to get out of here, but whatever you do, don't drop the mic. We will see you all next week.